Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to another live stream. We are going to be covering what else, Alexander? The European elections, the EU Parliament elections. That is the big story. At least that's the big story here in Europe. We know that in the US it's Memorial Day. So if you are in the US, you're joining us from the States, happy Memorial Day. We hope you're having a really good 3 day weekend.
Mm.
And here in Europe, Alexander, we had the EU Parliament elections. Of course, the big story was Farage and Brexit and the Brexit
Mm.
Party. But there are another 27 countries in the
Correct.
EU and 28 in total. And Alexander, it was, I don't want to say definitively that it was a rise in the Euroskeptics or a rise in the Greens or the fall of the center right or the center left. I think it was, at least from the media that I read, whether it was mainstream media or alternative media, it was kind of all over the place, the
Mm.
reports. Some people
Mm.
said, the Greens crushed it. Other people said that the Euroskeptics and the nationalists, the far rights, whatever you want to call them, they crushed it. Other people said this was a vote for Brexit, for a
Mm.
no deal Brexit. This was a vote for Remain. Some people said Le Pen, delivered a crushing victory to Macron. Other people said that Macron's party came out way ahead. I saw a mixed bag of stuff.
Mm. Mm.
Alexander, for everyone that's joining us, and hello to everyone wherever you are in the world. Scotland, Wisconsin, England, everyone out there. We're gonna get to your
Mm.
questions and your comments. Alexander, how did you see these elections?
Right. First of all, I think we need to divide these elections into two. I mean, there's the Euro elections in Britain, which have a particular dynamic because they crystallise around the question of Brexit, and it's very important to remember that in Britain, the British people had been promised that these elections would never happen. So these are unwanted elections which took place in an atmosphere of political crisis centred on the specific issue of Brexit, of Britain leaving the European Union. Elsewhere, in the other 27 countries, obviously things have taken a different turn. And I think we need to analyse these two sets of elections, the ones in Britain and the ones elsewhere in Europe, in a different way. Now, in Britain, it's very clear Britain remains a divided country on the question of Brexit. There are Remain regions and there are Leave regions. But overall, it is absolutely indisputable, as far as I'm concerned, who the big winner is. The big winner is Nigel Farage and the Brexit Party. Any other analysis, any other proposal, any attempt, for example, to build up the Liberal Democrat Party in Britain to some sort of equivalent position to this runaway victory that the Brexit Party and Nigel Farage have achieved is completely wrong and is being carried out in bad faith. If we look at the overall pattern of results, they repeat the trends of the referendum of 2016, only they don't just repeat them, they emphasise them. They show that London is Remain, Scotland, which has a pro-independence party in power, is Remain, but Scotland may be seceding from the UK at some point, and Northern Ireland, which is a anomalous part politically of the rest of the United Kingdom, because it also has a very, very large block of voters who want to secede from the United Kingdom. That is also Remain. England and Wales, every single region of England and Wales, apart from London, voted Leave and did so in some places by very big margins. That was true in traditional working class Labour heartlands in northwest and northeast England. It was true in conservative heartlands in what used to be called the Garden of England, the richer counties, the home counties around London. everywhere across England and Wales, the Welsh valleys, as I said, the English moors, the coal mining regions, the old industrial places, the rich stockbroker belt, all of those places voted leave. And they have delivered for Nigel Farage and the Brexit Party, a party which had no existence a few months ago, the biggest mandate. They're now the biggest single party in the European Parliament. I mean, that is extraordinary. And I would add that had the election gone on a little longer, I think the Brexit Party's victory might have been even bigger. So that is the true lesson of the British Euro elections. Across Europe, obviously, you get different results in different countries. But overall, it seems to me the trend is very clear. Firstly, the old centre, the parties that are identified most strongly with the EU project, which have run the EU, the parties like the CDU in Germany, the SPD in Germany, those parties are now clearly, the old Socialist Party in France, they are clearly in eclipse. They are losing ground. Angela Merkel's party, the CDU, CSU bloc, has fewer seats in the European Parliament than Nigel Farage's Brexit Party, which is extraordinary. What is happening is that there is a drift towards the Eurosceptic right, which has increased considerably from somewhere around 20% of the vote in the 2014 election to over 25% of the vote in this election, and is still gaining ground. And the other side of the story is that we see in many places, including, by the way, in Britain, the Greens, who pose as an anti-establishment party in some places and are quite definitely an establishment party in other places, but they are the left. They are now starting to scoop up the left. So we are starting to see, I think, a clear trend across the EU to the collapse of the EU centre, a move towards the left and the right. The right-wing parties are growing stronger, and there is now a clear anti-EU bloc within the European Parliament, which will only grow, in my opinion. So it's a vote against the centre, it's a vote against the establishment, and in Britain, it's clearly, in England and Wales at least, a clear vote for Brexit.
All right, we'll get into some more detail on the UK. But Alexander, what other countries stood out in your opinion as you were watching the votings? Which countries were the most interesting for you, and which results either fell in line with what you thought was going to happen, and which countries shocked you? Like, which countries did you say, "Oh my God, I never expected this"?
Right. Of the three big countries, Germany, Italy, and France. I'll come to Spain also, which is also a big country, obviously. But of Germany, Italy, and France, these are the three core countries that set up the EU back in the 1950s. They were the ones that negotiated it. The results were very much as I'd expected them in Germany, very much as I expected them in Italy, where Salvini is now conclusively established as the most powerful politician in Italy. I mean, his coalition Five-Star movement is now definitely in eclipse. The Northern League that he leads is clearly in the ascendant. It's growing stronger. But the most interesting result was in France, where Macron pulled out all the stops to win against Marine Le Pen, and Marine Le Pen actually beat him in the popular vote, which was unexpected, I think, by many people. But it shows that Macron has managed, to a certain extent, to consolidate establishment opinion in France behind him. The old parties, like the old Gaullist Party of Jacques Chirac, the old Socialist Party of François Mitterrand and François Hollande, they have all but collapsed. And the left party led by Jean-Luc Mélenchon, has failed to make any significant impact. I again expect that the trend in France will be increasingly towards Marine Le Pen. I think she suffered a certain eclipse during the presidential election, but she is now clearly establishing herself as the opponent of the establishment in France. Countries where the result did surprise me and which went the other way was Spain, where I thought the Vox party, which had done very strongly in the recent parliamentary vote, would be able to build on that, and instead it fell back, with the Socialist Party re-establishing itself as the strongest party in Spain. That did come as a surprise to me, and it suggests to me that memories of the Francoist era remain very strong in Spain and are still working against Vox and parties like Vox. Though I should make it very clear, I do not regard Vox as a threat to Spanish democracy, but I can see how it could be smeared or portrayed in that way. And elsewhere, I suppose a big surprise was Austria, where I'd expected that after the video, both Kurz and the Freedom Party would do badly. Kurz and the Freedom Party each did well.
Kurz crushed it. He crushed
absolutely, he crushed it. But as I said, nonetheless, we've now had a vote of no confidence in him, which I suspect that the instigators of it will now bitterly regret. Now, elsewhere, Greece.
Go back to that. Go back to that. Why would they regret it? Who are the instigators? Why would they regret it?
The socialists, I think, were the major instigators, and now it looks to me as if Kurz is definitely going to win. I mean, I think this is now looking very likely. And I suspect, by the way, the Freedom Party, I thought held its ground surprisingly well, despite the criticism that he came in for. And I would not be surprised if in the election there's a pendulum swing back to it. So I think Austria is an indication that these sort of dirty tricks campaigns, these sting operations, more and more people are seeing through them. And at the same time, as I said, it's clear to me that the old, the sort of socialist party, which used to be the dominant party in Austria, is undergoing the same sort of crisis that the SPD in Germany, its sister party in Germany, is going through. So that's Austria. Now, if you go further afield, the other person who is clearly the master of his house is Viktor Orban in Hungary, who crushed it. I mean, he's done.
Wow. 53%?
Well, exactly. So,
wow.
I mean, exactly. I mean, there is no other political leader in Europe, apart from Vladimir Putin, I would quickly stress, if you consider Russia part of Europe. But apart from, within the EU, there is no other politician who dominates the political landscape of his own country to the extent that Viktor Orban does. And I think that will only strengthen his position within the EU. And of course, he is working slowly towards forming this coalition, this alliance with Salvini of Italy, which I suspect will become an increasingly powerful force in Europe from now on. I want to make one final point, which is that, of course, and it's a point we've made many times in our programs, the European elections, the European Parliament elections, should be always treated with great care. They very rarely have any major influence on European policy, because the European Parliament is by far the weakest of the EU institutions. But with this this alliance of Salvini and Orban now emerging, with Marine Le Pen increasingly looking strong in France, it seems to me that this alliance, this group, is now going to get much stronger, and it will increasingly have an influence on EU policy at the centre. So that's where we are at the moment. That's my overall view. As I said, interesting that the Greens have done so well, but the Greens have done well in the past. I doubt they'll be able to translate it into anything significant over the long haul, because the Greens are different parties in different places, and they've never really given me the impression of being really ready to lead any major European country forward.
Let's talk a little bit about Poland, which also crushed it. Alexander, what do you think about Poland? And also give me your opinion as what you think.
Yeah,
What do you think happened in the Netherlands? We have the
yeah,
Forum for Democracy actually enters the parliament for the first time, I believe. They actually now are
yes,
going to be in the parliament. I believe they
yes,
got 3 seats.
yes.
But what we saw in the Netherlands was actually kind of going against the nation
Yes,
statism, the populist tide.
yes, yes. Well, the Netherlands is a very different place. I mean, if I may say so, because I know the Netherlands reasonably well, actually. It is in some ways the most European of all European countries. This has always been the impression to me. They're a bit nervous of the giant next door, the giant being Germany. The English is very widely spoken in the Netherlands. It's almost the coeval language amongst young people to Dutch. And it's always seemed to me that if there was one place where Europeanism, if I can call it that, would be popular, it would be the Netherlands. So clearly, there's been tensions in the Netherlands in the past over immigration and such things, but I was not wholly surprised that in the end, Dutch voters, seeing the whole EU project now at risk, as it may have seemed to them, consolidated around the more sort of centrist pro-EU banner. That didn't come as a complete surprise to me. Poland, I should have mentioned. I mean, that is another, as you said, they crushed it there, and it's very similar, in my opinion, to Orban. In fact, Orban and Kaczynski, who's the true leader of Poland, are very close allies. What prevents Kaczynski making common cause with Orban and Salvini is Russia. Kaczynski's very anti-Russian.
He's anti-Russian.
He's very anti-Russian. The Polish
Okay.
government in Poland is very anti-Russian. So that they balked at making common cause with
Okay.
especially Orban, but especially Salvini, and because they feel that Salvini is too obviously pro-Russian. May I make an observation about this? I think this is very much an issue for Kaczynski himself, who's got all kinds of issues about this, also involving the death of his brother,
In
his
the
twin
plane
brother,
crash,
in
in
the
the
plane
yeah.
crash. Exactly. And I think he's got this idea that the Russians were behind that, which they weren't, by the way, but that's another story. I don't get the sense that most ordinary Poles share these very strong anti-Russian feelings. I mean, obviously some do, but I would have, my overall impression actually is that if you're talking about Polish opinion generally, and again, it's a country I know reasonably well. I get the impression that sort of anti-Russian feeling is not as strong there as many people think it is. But anyway, to the extent that it exists, it's obviously a problem in consolidating, if you like, the anti-centrist position. But with Kaczynski, it's a very big problem. Important point to make: countries, politicians who've done well in these elections, Orban, Kaczynski, Salvini, Le Pen, Farage, they're all anti-EU. In the case of Kaczynski, he's locked in an ugly confrontation with the European leadership, who've been threatening to strip Poland of its voting rights in the EU Council. In the case of Orban, his party has been thrown out of the European People's Party, led by Angela Merkel. In the case of Salvini, Macron, as we famously know, withdrew his ambassador from Italy. And in the case of Farage, well, Farage is the most straightforward anti-EU leader of all. And of course, Marine Le Pen, to a great extent, is also. So there we go. If you want to succeed politically in Europe today, if you're not a Green, and the Greens have done well, but if you're not a Green, then be as anti-EU as you can get. And that's the way to win support in your own country.
All right, before we move to the UK and cover that topic a little more in depth, Farage and his big win, let's see, we have people checking in from Switzerland, London, Slovakia, California, Sussex, England, Vancouver, Texas, New York, Alexander, from all over the place, and that's good. And it's interesting to have people from the US who are tuning in to take interest in what's happening in Europe. So welcome everybody to this live chat. And Alexander, a couple of more countries that I want to talk about here. Austria is going to be having snap elections.
Yes.
Greece is going to be having snap elections. What do you make of those?
Right. Well, first of all, I think I've touched on Austria. I'll be very surprised now if Kurz doesn't come out at the top of the poll in Austria. Austrian politics are complicated.
But he'll have to form a coalition.
He will have to form a coalition, and that's where I think he's going to have problems, because he's burnt his bridges with the Freedom Party, which will, I think, from now on continue to grow stronger. It'll be very interesting to see what kind of coalition he's going to form, because if he forms a coalition with socialists, that goes against the kind of coalition that he had previously. And I suspect a lot of his voters will be unhappy with it. I think this election, this Euro election, is both a victory for Kurz. It's also a warning towards him. Now, Greece is a sad case for both of us, because it's a country with which we have a very strong connection. I mean, I'm a Greek national, a Greek citizen. I believe you are actually currently in Greece. I predict that there will be a clear-cut win in the parliamentary elections for the New Democracy Party. I know there are different views. What I would say is, in a sense, it's surprising that we're getting back to the New Democracy Party, because, of course, when Tsipras won and came to power in 2015, he was posing as the anti-establishment insurrectionist who was going against the New Democracy Party. And, of course, he was a complete failure. A disastrous failure in Greece. And what's remarkable about Greece is how the New Democracy Party has pulled together, and all the indications are that it is the only game in town in Greece, because all of the other parties that might have been expected to form a proper opposition to it have completely discredited themselves over the last couple of years. Golden Dawn seems to be in decline. And of course, Syriza has completely blown itself up. I mean, I know you are more cautious than me about this, and of course, we both know that Greece is an unpredictable place, and there's lots of history. But I will personally be astonished if if after this election, Tsipras is still prime minister. I think we must look forward to Mr. Mitsotakis, scion of a great political dynasty from Western Crete, becoming prime minister at the head of New Democracy again. And though I suspect it will be a more competent government in some respects than, well, it could hardly not be, than Syriza was, we must make it very clear that it is in a sense a return to something like the old order. I mean, I think you have more expectations of the New Democracy Party than I do as a reformist force. We shall see. But I have to say, having remembered Tsipras coming forward as the party who would overthrow the dynasties, the political dynasties that have ruled Greece, of which I should remind our viewers I belong to one, it is a great paradox to me, and to see a sign of a political dynasty coming back. Mr. Mitsotakis, I am prepared to wait and see what he does, and if he does well for Greece, good for him.
Yeah, we'll see. Those will actually be the first elections after these parliament elections. Those will be the first general elections that we'll have. Absolutely. So that'll be interesting to see what happens there.
Absolutely.
Alexander, a lot of people from Ireland, I think, on the chat. What happened in Ireland? It just seems that they're kind of they're going the pro EU route, I would say. I mean, that's the
Oh,
impression that I
absolutely,
get. Maybe people in the
absolutely,
chat
yes.
can also let us know what's going on with Ireland,
It
but
is,
there doesn't seem to
and
be much pushback against the EU there at the
no,
moment.
and I'm going to make it. I'm going to guess that this is partly a reaction to what is happening in Britain, because of course with Britain being with such a strong showing for the Brexit party in Britain, England and Ireland are very closely connected politically, linguistically, culturally, in all sorts of ways. But one must never forget that Ireland is a country that seceded from Britain after a very long, decades long, a centuries long period of conflict, which culminated in a fierce independence war in the 1920s, with echoes of that conflict continuing still, and with the issue of the future of Northern Ireland, or of the north of Ireland, as some people, who want a united Ireland call it, and who have reminded me, that issue remains unresolved. So, where Ireland had at one time been very sceptical about the EU, and also, of course, was the subject of a very ferocious bailout, I think the feeling now is in Ireland, if Britain goes in one direction and exits the EU, we're going to go in another direction, which we're going to strengthen our position within the EU. We're going to stick strongly by the backstop, because that's very important to keep both the peace agreement in Ireland ticking and also to keep the Irish economy going. There are concerns in Ireland that if there's a hard Brexit in Britain, that could have a very severe impact on the Irish economy. And I think on the part of some people in Ireland who are looking further ahead, I think there is a feeling that the way Brexit is pushing things in Ireland, it increases the chances of a united Ireland. In other words, for Northern Ireland or the north of Ireland, at some point, leaving the United Kingdom and joining the South. Whether that is right or wrong, I'm not going to discuss on this programme. But I think that all of these things have come together, and I think that they may explain the trends in Ireland, where I predict, by the way, there will also be parliamentary elections very soon.
All right. Let's get to some super chats, Alexander, and then we'll move on to the UK and to Farage. And we have a $50 super chat from Carolyn. Thank you very much for that generous super chat. Nigel Farage on LBC today expressed his fear that some people still think he's part of UKIP. Are the British somewhat confused? Alexander.
No, I don't think so. I think, well, I mean, there may be a few people, but I think overall people are very clear about who Nigel Farage is and what the Brexit Party is. I mean, they confirmed that in their votes. UKIP, by the way, is clearly now in decline. It still managed a more substantial vote.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, how did they do? We didn't get much press
well,
on UKIP.
they didn't get much press, but I mean, they still clocked up a couple of percentage votes in various places. So there is still it's still a presence. The one person who didn't do well was Tommy Robinson, by the way. I've said many times on our programs.
You said his name. We're going to definitely get demonetized now.
Okay. Yeah. Well. Let me say again. I mean, well, quite. But I mean, let me say again. I mean, I've always argued that he is not the political force in Britain that some people assume he is, and his personal vote in this election was not good. So I think we need to focus on Farage, and I don't think there is any confusion in most people's minds between Farage and UKIP.
Yeah, he got censored a lot, though. I mean, I don't know if he was given access to all the social media privileges that a lot of the other candidates had, if he would have done better. I mean, obviously, I think he would have done better. I don't know if he would have gotten a seat, but he really got crushed by the social media giants very unfairly.
Oh, absolutely, no question about it. There's no question about it. But if he was really running a genuine insurrectionary movement, then he would have found ways around that. And the point is, he didn't. As I said, UKIP is still a force in Britain, but it has been far eclipsed by the
By the
Brexit
Brexit Party.
Party and by Nigel Farage. And we need to be very clear about this. Nigel Farage has emerged as, the leader of an awful lot of opinion in Britain. He is a dominant politician in Britain now.
He is going to be prime minister. Don't answer that just yet, Alexander. That is one question that I want you to answer because there's a lot of talk about it. But we have a £5 super chat from Simon. I'm buying Nigel Farage a wheelbarrow to carry his balls into the EU Council. Very good, Simon. We like that super chat. And that goes along the lines of my question to you, Alexander. Nigel Farage is a larger-than-life character. What do you expect from him as he enters the EU Parliament? Is he a miracle worker? Will he get the no-deal Brexit finally off the ground and moving? Can he be Prime Minister of the United Kingdom?
Right. Let's deal with no-deal Brexit, because, of course, what he's going to do, he's now got the Brexit Party organised and up and running, and he has demonstrated its strength. As I said, I repeat again, it has swept the board everywhere in England and Wales, outside London. I mean, it's been a tidal wave. Now, the Conservative Party, the vast majority of Conservative MPs are returned by seats across England and Wales. They will be looking at this, and their big question is going to be, how do we keep our seats? We're not going to keep our seats realistically by going against the things Farage says. If we set our faces against Brexit, if we oppose a hard Brexit, which is what Farage is talking about, and I think increasingly now a hard Brexit means a no-deal Brexit, then the Conservative Party is going to be in complete crisis. I think that is going to increase support for a no-deal Brexit within the Conservative Party in Parliament. If we're talking about the membership of the Conservative Party, I think that the grassroots Conservatives across the country, I think they've already come to that view already long ago. So, unless something goes radically wrong within the Conservative Party electoral process, because remember, they're supposed to be electing a new leader to replace Theresa May, I predict we're going to get a pro-Brexit, pro-hard Brexit, I suspect, no-deal Brexit leader, either Boris Johnson or Dominic Raab, and I personally think it's much more likely to be Boris Johnson. I think this person will calculate that the only way forward for me is to press on with a Brexit on the 31st of October, which will have to be a hard Brexit, because that's the only way I could get rid of Farage. And I think that most of the Conservative Party will go along with him. Unfortunately, there is an irreconcilable pro-EU element within the Conservative Party. They're calculated to be around 25 to 60 MPs. It's not entirely clear how many of them there are, and they are led increasingly, obviously, by the Chancellor, our Finance Minister, Philip Hammond. And what these people are now saying, and I think this would be a total disaster for the Conservative Party, is that if a pro-Brexit Conservative Prime Minister, let's say it's Boris Johnson, goes for a no-deal Brexit, they will vote against him in a vote of confidence and essentially ally with the Labour Party to bring him down in order to prevent a no-deal Brexit. And that could include revoking Article 50. Now, if that happens, with the Brexit Party in existence, with a Nigel Farage leading it, I expect that there would be a massive swing towards the Brexit Party in any forthcoming general election. And I think at that point, the political crisis that we have been already looking at in Britain would get even worse. So it's complicated But Farage's rise and the Brexit Party's rise now makes a no-deal Brexit much more likely than before. Unfortunately, it doesn't conclusively ensure it.
What about Labour and Corbyn? What happened to
Yeah,
them during the
yeah.
elections? I mean, they got hit hard, but it
They
wasn't as
got they got
drastic as the Tories.
no, no. The Conservatives fell to was it
9%, yeah.
9%, and Labour fell to 14%,
14.
which, by the way, is not far off. I mean, back in I think it was in 2009 they fell to 15%. So they've come back from pretty bad Euro election results. I think that Corbyn has the same problem, in some ways, as a pro-Brexit leader of the Conservative Party would have, in the sense that he leads a party, the Labour Party, which can only win a majority and form a majority government, in fact, form a government, if it brings together its working class voters from its traditional heartlands in northern England and the Midland of England and in South Wales, together with middle class voters in southern England and in London especially, many of whom voted Remain. The problem he has is that Corbyn has been trying to keep the balance. He's been saying, look, I'm for Brexit. I'm not so much in favour of a hard Brexit. I want a kind of soft Brexit, so he's trying to keep a foot in with both camps. The problem he has is that just as the Conservatives have to face the problem of a very large pro-EU group within the Conservative Parliamentary Party, Corbyn has an even bigger problem, that he has a very much bigger pro-EU group within the Parliamentary Labour Party. And in his case, most of the membership of the Labour Party is also pro-EU. And they are pushing him relentlessly to take an anti-Brexit Remain position. They don't want him. They say they want him to go for a second referendum. But what they want him to do is to commit to a second referendum in which the Labour Party will campaign for Remain. Now, Corbyn says, if I do that, I will lose irretrievably the Leave voters, the working class Leave voters in Northern England and the Midlands, and Labour can never form a government again. But people within his own party refuse to accept this. And though he is, on any calculations, right, he is being pushed to an extraordinary degree by these irreconcilable pro-EU people within the Labour Party, who I think, if I have to be frank about it, in some cases are far more committed to keeping Britain within the EU than they are to the Labour Party and to its future.
Yeah, there's some strong forces, I think. I think that's very obvious that there are some very strong
Absolutely.
forces that definitely put the EU above the UK's best interest. I mean,
They
that's
put
become glaringly obvious.
Absolutely, they put the EU above the UK's best interest because, I mean, what we're seeing is an increasing polarisation within Britain, with people on both sides now becoming more and more angry. And at the same time, they're putting commitment to the EU above their own parties. So they're prepared to sacrifice the future of the Conservative Party and the future of the Labour Party
Right.
to the cause of keeping Britain in the EU. And I think this is a disaster because I get to say, whatever you may think of these two parties, I come back to a point which I made on previous programmes. I mean, I have a lot of time for Nigel Farage. I made that very clear on these programmes. I'm a great admirer of him in many ways. But the Brexit Party is a single issue party. At this moment in time, it cannot govern. It doesn't have the technocratic skills and the depth the depth of knowledge and resource to govern Britain. And we have to be realistic about that. And nor does any of the other parties, apart from the Labour and the Conservative Party at the moment. I mean, that may change, but
Right.
that's the situation at the moment.
What happens, Alexander, when, if and when Nigel Farage, Boris Johnson, whoever's going to be prime minister, they actually do negotiate or they actually do come through with a no-deal Brexit?
Yes.
Those MPs in the parliament are gone by October then?
Right, I'm going to tell you what. Yes, I think so. I think that there's a no-deal Brexit. Then Britain leaves the EU on the 31st of October, and there's been some uncertainty about this. But I think at that point, these MPs are all gone, all of them, Farage's MPs and all the others. They'll have done their job as far as Farage is concerned, because they'll have leveraged the situation into a no-deal Brexit, but they will no longer be in the European Parliament. And I think there'll be some people like Salvini and Marine Le Pen who will probably be sorry to see them go. But there we are. Others,
yeah, they'll get
like
weakened significantly.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly,
the Euroskeptic, the anti-EU type of crowd.
Yes, they'll be weakened, but I don't think we should overstate that, because I think most of them are already calculating on the probability that these people will go anyway. So
Okay.
I don't think this will affect the overall trends. The person who wants to see them go is Macron. And of course, if we go back a few weeks, when there was the question of, the first Brexit extensions, the reason Macron, who is now positioned very strongly, and also with the bloc of MPs he supports within the EU Parliament, as the person who's pushing very hard now for EU integration, and there's a bloc of MPs supporting that within the EU Parliament. The point Macron was making was, we don't want the British in the EU because they're always a force for resisting integration. Now that they are voting for Brexit in this way, they will be an even stronger force if they remain within the EU. And with the Brexit Party on the rampage in the European Parliament, well, I absolutely do not want people like Farage there. So that is going to strengthen Macron's determination to get Britain out of the EU on the 31st of October. And that, I think, is going to count for a great deal, because with Merkel now definitely fading, I think that's the other effect of these elections, by the way. I think Macron, even despite the fact that he's come second within France to Marine Le Pen, in overall European politics is now getting stronger.
Yeah, I agree with that. People don't realize that Macron actually, even though in France he did lose to Le Pen,
Yeah.
overall he becomes kind of a kingmaker between
That's right.
the conservative center and the left center parties. He's kind of his group of people that he controls.
Exactly.
They become kind of kingmakers in the parliament. So Macron actually now has a lot more power, and Macron is very dangerous. Alexander, I want to get to Merkel. Before that, though,
Yes.
William, thank you for your super chat. No comment. Nancy, thank you for your super chat. Enjoy watching you both. Best coverage on current events there is. Intelligent and honest. Thank you very much, Nancy. And from S. Bennett, £200 super chat. Thank you very much,
Thank
S.
you
Bennett.
very much.
Thank you. Thank God for you both. You're a breath of fresh air. Thank you, S. Bennett, very much for that generous super chat. We really appreciate it. Guys, thank you to everyone who is tuning in for this special live stream on the EU Parliament elections. And thank you for all your support. We really appreciate it. Hit that like button. Share the channel with everybody you know. I've gotten a lot of emails, Alexander, on the fact that, our videos are not playing for some people. You can't find them in search. All kinds of stuff that's going on. I don't know why. I mean, I don't think we're that controversial at all, to be honest. I just think we kind of just lay out our opinions and try to be as factual and as truthful as possible.
Correct.
But I guess the YouTube and the Google gods don't like that too much. But anyway, who gives an F? Alexander, Angela Merkel. What happened in Germany? Was the outcome good for her? Was it bad?
No.
Was it a draw? What's going through her mind?
I think it's a bad outcome. I mean, first of all, let's talk about the SPD, which is the party that she relies upon as her coalition party. The SPD is Germany's oldest party. It has had a huge history. It was, by the way, at one point in time, Karl Marx's party, in fact, which they don't always like you to remember nowadays. But, it's had this extraordinary history. It used to be the dominant party in Germany. It's now gone down to 15%, and it's still, I think, falling. There must be more and more people in the SPD who are saying this going into a grand coalition with Angela Merkel after we did so badly in the last parliamentary elections in Germany, and when we said during those elections that we would not go back into coalition with her, I think more and more people in the SPD must be saying to themselves what I have been saying all along, that that was a terrible mistake. And at some point, I think that feeling is going to get stronger, and I think the chances are that we are going to see the grand coalition collapse. I think that moment has been accelerated. When that grand coalition collapses, Merkel's party, which also lost significant ground, their worst ever result, I mean, they're now well below 30%, I believe, which is terrible for the CDU, the dominant party in West German politics for almost as long as I can remember. When the grand coalition collapses, I predict that she will be gone. And I suspect that will be only a relatively short time now.
What's the message that the Germans are trying to send Merkel, Alexander?
Well, I think what's happened is that Merkel lost
Is this a migration issue? Is this something else? What's the message that they're trying to send her? Why is she not listening? Because Merkel is very. I mean, I've read that Merkel is very in tune with polling. She's very, I mean, she governs by the polls. That's what I've heard, and I quote that. She governs by the polls. Obviously, she's not reading the right polls.
Well, she's not reading the right polls because, of course, what she likes, and somebody once said this to me, somebody who, well, it came to me from by one remove, but from somebody who knows her, which is that she is extremely treacherous and loves power.
And that extremely treacherous and loves power.
And loves power. And I mean, I say that because, of course, her image is so completely different. Her image is of this very straight-talking, very reasonable, very solid, very honourable person. Actually, if you follow her, what she actually does as Chancellor, the image and the reality are very, very discordant. Now, what has happened in Germany is, I think, a number of things. I think, first of all, she's been around for a very, very long time. And because she follows opinion polls so closely, what she has done is that she has always governed, as you say, according to the opinion polls, which means always taking the line of least resistance. The result is that she inherited a very, very strong Germany indeed, a Germany which had got over the problems of unification, where industries were whirring, where people were in jobs, and steadily, because she has been a force for passivity, that passivity has turned steadily into a kind of stagnation, and problems are piling up. In the meantime, she made this disastrous decision on the migration issue, which lost a lot of support. I mean, the AfD is still there. It didn't put on it didn't put on votes in these elections, but it is still a force. And at the same time, the Greens are now taking away votes from the SPD, her coalition party, the SPD, because Germans are sensing that things in Germany are beginning to go wrong. The economy is teetering on the brink of recession. There's the car industry, the fabled German car industry isn't doing as well as it was, and it's facing problems in both China and in the United States.
Yeah, Trump is hitting them hard.
Hard, exactly. And there's a sort of growing sense that Merkel really isn't addressing these problems and that she doesn't really have answers to these problems. By the way, that really came across to me very strongly in the parliamentary elections of a year ago, when it struck me that Merkel looked very tired and very stale and very lacking in any real program to take forward. And unfortunately, the CDU has missed the chance, in my opinion, to go for candidates, for strong personalities who would have taken Germany forward decisively in another direction. So Germany is not looking, I think, very healthy at the moment. And this won't last. There are lots of talented and able people in Germany. But I think the reign of Merkel has created a political desert in Germany. And the Germans are now paying the price, and they are starting to sense this, which is now why people on both the right and the left are turning against her.
I want to talk a little bit about Salvini, Alexander. I think he's an interesting character. He said that this is a new day for Europe. Mm. Is Salvini the next great leader we're going to see coming out of Europe, and why is Italy going this route? What's happened in Italy? What are the dynamics that have brought Salvini to power in Italy? And how much of a force do you think Salvini is? I mean, it seems that he is going from one strength to another. This guy looks like the real deal.
Yes, I mean, first of all, I mean, the thing to say about Italy is that, of course, there could not have been a more pro-EU country if you'd gone to Italy circa 1990. I mean, any idea of Italy being the place where there would be a rebellion against the EU at that time would have seemed completely ridiculous. Remember, the founding document of the EU is the Treaty of Rome. So, let's never forget this. What has happened is that the Italians were persuaded to join the euro. They were then had imposed on this extremely tough monetary policy that goes with being a member of the euro. They also had imposed on them this extremely tough fiscal policy that also goes with being in the euro. This has never really worked very well for Italy, which has historically grown its economy by running very slack fiscal and monetary policies and accepting the debt creation and inflation that goes with that. And, one can be critical of that kind of policy, and in some ways I am. But one mustn't forget that Italy has the second biggest industrial base within the EU and had become a pretty prosperous country. What has happened since Italy joined the EU is that the economy has stagnated, real wages have fallen, youth unemployment remains extremely high, and the banking system in Italy is, as everybody knows, virtually insolvent. And Italy has not been able to address these problems and to strike out on its own and do the things that it needs to do in order to get its economy working again, because it is caught inside this euro straitjacket. Now, that, after a very, very long time, has produced mounting dissatisfaction in Italy, and cometh the times, cometh the man, as we like to say in Britain. That has eventually produced a charismatic and popular leader who says Italy must be left alone to solve its own problems. It can't be submerged under these waves of immigrants, which is the other thing that the EU has been so keen on. Remember, Italy is right on the front line of the immigrant flows from North Africa. And that man is Salvini. Salvini has captured that image of Italy. He comes across, despite of being, the leader of the Northern League, which was at one time practically a secessionist movement which wanted northern Italy to break apart from the rest of Italy. And what Salvini has managed to do, he conveys for many Italians a very, very strong Italian image. And he's so unlike these grey technocratic figures that dominated Italian politics for so long after the Second World War. I mean, Berlusconi was also a colourful figure. Salvini is one step beyond that, and he doesn't come with all the baggage of corruption and oligopoly that Berlusconi had. So he's a very remarkable man and certainly bears watching.
Right. I think Italy is definitely worth watching, no doubt about it. Alexander, let's take a couple more super chats here that we have. Let's see. Let's go to. Let me pull them up here. From Mary Lamb, a $10 super chat. Great job, boys. Thank you very much, Mary. From Buzz Adur, super chat $1.99. Watch you every day. Thank you very much. And from Stefan Garud, a £5 super chat. Alexander, with Germany having economic difficulty in the economy and no deal Brexit being likely, will the car industry push for a better deal? Good question.
Well, this has been a long-standing discussion. A lot of people on the sort of soft pro-Brexit position, especially within the Conservative Party, were confident that the Germans would come round and do a deal because the German car industry would put pressure on German politicians to make that deal. If that ever happened, Merkel paid no attention. I think the point was that up to now, up till fairly recently, Germany's economy was doing quite well. I think it's doing significantly less well now, and that pressure may grow. The point is that under Theresa May, Britain didn't have a politician, a political leader, a prime minister who was really prepared to give the Germans the real sense that she would go for a no-deal Brexit. I think that's absolutely clear now. And I think with someone like Boris Johnson or Dominic Raab, it might be different.
Mm-hmm. All right, Alexander, what are you looking at now in Europe? How do you see the tea leaves forming after these elections?
Right. Okay. Let's talk.
They have to vote a whole new commission now too.
Oh, absolutely.
The five top guys.
That's going to be a very, very complicated process, because what we now have is the centre party, the centre bloc, the European People's Party and the Social Democrats. They're still the biggest bloc, but they can't rule things in the European Parliament in the way that they used to do it. So they're going to get into coalition. I don't think there's any doubt about this, with Emmanuel Macron's group. With Guy Verhofstadt, this Belgian politician. I mean, he's now clearly
he's more powerful now.
Well, he's more powerful, but he's also clearly a Macron's creature, I think, within the European system. I mean, he may not have started like that, but it's now quite clear that it's Macron who's pulling his strings.
Yeah.
So the point is that paradoxically, in the short and immediate term, the integrationists are going to get stronger, in the sense that Macron is going to push for a more extreme integrationist policies, which in fact goes against popular trends in Europe, because the popular trends show the Eurosceptic parties rising. They've increased their share of the vote. So the harder Macron pushes, the more resistance will grow. And we'll see, as I said, this Orban-Salvini alliance, I suspect, gaining strength. I suspect Kaczynski in Poland will, whatever his concerns about Russia, eventually have to join it, because realistically he's got no choice. And we'll have Marine Le Pen increasingly barking at Macron's heels in France as well, because the thing that's now come across, by the way, and this is an important change, when Marine Le Pen was a political force before, there were other political leaders, in fact, like Macron in the event, who could emerge to challenge her, and that is why she lost the presidential election. It really now is, it seems to me, in France, Macron versus Marine Le Pen. There is no one else. The challenge for Mélenchon didn't crystallize, and I suspect he will fade away now. So, we're looking at a potential Le Pen shift a shift towards Le Pen in France. At the same time, as I said, that the Salvini-Orban group gets stronger. But this is going to happen at one and the same time as Macron is going to push harder for EU integration. So we're going to see the unstoppable force hit upon the immovable obstacle. I mean, we're going to see increasing tensions in the EU, and that is even before the recession, which now everybody expects will come in a year or two's time, and which will make the dynamic of this process even more difficult.
Yeah, I mean, Macron is the guy. He's the guy put in place by the Rothschilds, by the globalists, by the elites. He's their man to deliver EU integration. He's the one to
Yes,
deliver
yes,
the
yes,
globalist vision, the neoliberal utopia. He's the guy. How
yes.
scary do you think Macron really is? Because now we're going to be seeing not only Macron versus Le Pen in France, but I would say you're looking at Macron, especially with Merkel now fading away. You're looking at Macron versus Salvini, Orban, Farage,
Yes,
Le Pen. I mean, this is going to be the
yes,
ultimate.
yeah.
This is the
It's
battle now.
it is the battle, but you see, I predict that it'll end in a smash, because what Macron is doing is going to increase resistance, just as it's increased resistance within France, and I predict it's going to increase resistance across Europe also, and it's the more resistance the EU leadership comes up against, the more hardline and double down, the more they double down, and the more hardline they become. And the more they double down and become hardline, the more resistance they encounter. Britain, as I said, I think we've seen with the Brexit Party what has happened there, and I mean I predict it will leave in some form, despite the attempts to keep it in, and so they're probably going to lose Britain, and they're probably going to build up in Salvini a founder member of the EU, one of the original big three. They're going to create in Italy a tremendously powerful leader in Salvini, who's going to be the person who's going to oppose them. And of course, in France itself, within Macron's own country, he's going to face an increasingly strong and concerted challenge from Marine Le Pen. As for Germany, as I said, the situation looks there very confused.
All right, Alex, let's move a little back now and take a little wider look. How does
Yeah.
China? How does the U.S.? How does Russia? How do these countries? How do you think they're viewing these results?
Well, I think all of them will be looking at Europe, and they'll be saying that the European project is clearly going off the rails,
All
and
of them.
all of them will, and they will all say to themselves that if we're looking for a strong voice from Europe at the moment, it isn't there, because Europe is so obviously consumed with its own problems. So I think in Donald Trump's case, these elections are going to embolden him, and he's going to take an ever stronger line against the EU. And I predict we're going to see things starting to unveil there with steel tariffs and car tariffs and all those sort of things from Donald Trump. At the same time as Donald Trump will try to make alliances with EU leaders that he likes, like
Like who?
Kaczynski in Poland,
Orban.
like Orban, whom he met recently in the White House, in the US, and who he obviously gets on very well with. But of course, ultimately, the big player will be Salvini in Italy, and that I think, because Salvini is not yet Prime Minister of Italy, but I think realistically that's where this is going. So I think that's what Trump is going to be looking at. He's going to see a weaker Europe. He's going to see a Europe, a divided Europe. He's going to see a Europe that he can push even further against. And he's going to, as I say, be pitching alliances with European leaders that he likes. The Chinese, I think for a very long time, saw in Europe, in the EU, a potential partner. I think that they had a more, shall we say, favourable view of the EU than say than Donald Trump does. I think they'll be very disillusioned. They'll be looking at the mess in Europe, and they'll be saying, well, look, we're not in a position realistically to rely on these people because they're just not organized, and then they haven't got a clear idea of where they're going. As for the Russians, they will watch and wait. They will be looking at the situation in Europe. They'll be saying that the very hard-line anti-EU position that seemed to be emerging in 2014 is crumbling, and at the same time, Russia will probably sense that it's now definitely winning in Ukraine, because with the changes in government,
I was going to ask you about Ukraine just now. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, change of government there, with all sorts of policies starting to emerge, which beginning to look increasingly like Ukraine is trying to, or at least the new government in Ukraine is trying to shift away from this policy of confrontation with Russia. And I think the Russians have also now got good relations with Salvini. They've got good relations with Orban. They've got the Nord Stream pipeline largely, I mean, about 50% completed. And they'll be saying to themselves, things are going our way. We will watch and wait, and it all comes to him who waits. And I think that's the view in the Kremlin.
So you don't think any of the energy projects are in jeopardy at all?
No, I don't think so. I think that
Nord Stream 2, South Stream. What about Turkey? How are the Turks seeing this? How's Erdogan seeing these results?
I don't think. I think Erdogan at the moment is consumed with his own problems, to be quite honest. But I think that if you want to look at opinion in Turkey, I think this has been a big blow to the pro-EU forces in Turkey, which had always wanted to bring Turkey within the EU, because the kind of parties that are now in the ascendant across Europe clearly will never agree to Turkey joining in the EU. So I think Turkey will increasingly drift away, even irrespective of what happens to Erdogan.
Mm-hmm. All right. Super chat from RJ. Love from Annapolis, Maryland. Awesome. I used to live in Rockville, RJ, so I know the area very well. Moondragon, super chat, 20 SEK. Thank you very much, Moondragon, for that super chat. And from Ho Chi Minh, 1999 pounds, super chat, Alexander. Is it in Russia's interest to see greater division in the EU with more Eurosceptic MEPs? Bearing in mind, most EU countries also subscribe to the NATO military encirclement of Russia. Always enjoying your shows. Thank you, Alexander. That's a great question.
Right.
What do you make of
It's
that?
a very good
NATO
question.
and Europe.
Right. The Russians always deny this. They always say that the EU, they value the EU as a trade partner, and they don't want to see trouble or unhappiness or instability within the EU. And I think that was broadly true until 2014. Then in 2014, the Maidan coup happened in Ukraine, and I think many Russians, including some Russians, very influential Russians, including people in the Kremlin, would have changed their views thereafter. And many of them who had previously had a fairly, shall we say, indulgent view of the EU, have now come to think of the EU as an adversary. And from their point of view, seeing dissension and division in the EU is no bad thing, and that's what's their calculation will be. It cannot have escaped their notice that the politicians within the EU who are strongest in wanting good relations with Russia, people like Salvini, people like Orban, people like Marine Le Pen, are anti the EU leadership. And no one in Russia can be oblivious to that.
All right, a super chat from Penguins fan. Every neoliberal leader that criticized Putin and Russia are gone. Hollande, Cameron, Obama, Stephen Harper, Merkel will be leaving, and now May. What do you make of that statement? They're all gone.
Well, absolutely
Merkel's still hanging around.
Merkel's still hanging around, but not for very much longer. And fundamentally, that's right. I predict that before very long, he will be the last man standing. I mean, when there was that crisis in 2014, when there was the Maidan coup in Ukraine, when there was the decision that was taken in July 2014 by the Western powers to impose sectoral sanctions against Russia. All the Western leaders who took that decision and President Poroshenko in Ukraine will have gone.
Remember that I think it was a G20 after
Yeah,
the Maidan where they took that decision where they actually made Putin sit at like a corner table in the back during like
absolutely,
one of the dinners. And like
exactly.
they all sat at the big, center table and they pushed Putin.
Yeah,
And then the press piled on and said, "Look, they've banished Putin all the way to a corner table,
yeah.
and they really just tried to mock him. And now he's the
That,
only one that is left of all these guys,
exactly. He's there. He's there. They've all
as
gone.
is
As I
Assad."
said, Merkel is hanging on by her fingernails, but she's the only one left.
Yeah,
It's quite remarkable.
it's remarkable. And like I said,
Mhm.
so is Assad. All you heard was Assad must go, Assad must go. I mean, they repeated it
Exactly.
verbatim, and now,
Exactly. And they were backing Poroshenko, who was the president of
yeah,
Ukraine, and the Ukrainian people have rejected him by a margin of 3-1.
yeah. It's at the end of the day, with all the pessimism in the world, Alexander, it seems that justice and sometimes the right outcomes do happen.
Oh yes, they
Sometimes it
do.
just needs time.
Yeah, it does need time. I mean, in the end, things do have a habit of sorting themselves out. Sometimes it takes a very long time,
Sometimes it takes a very long time.
life is short,
Yeah.
and we have to wait and live
And it
through
could be
it.
very painful and very destructive, but
Exactly.
eventually things sort themselves
Exactly.
out.
Exactly. Yeah.
Super
When I
chat.
was, yep, go
Yeah,
on,
go
just
on.
go on. No, I was just going to say when I was a history student, I remember reading Brodel, one of the great French historians, and he said that in the long run always wins,
That's right. The long game.
and it's true.
Always play
It's
the long
true.
game. Absolutely. From Penguins fan Alexander, update on Nord Stream.
Yes, more threats from the US to sanction everybody involved in it. The Russians have made it very clear that if German and Austrian companies pull out, they will continue and see it through. I don't personally think the Germans have any intention of pulling out. I think Nord Stream 2 I gather it's about 50% finished now. There's been various attempts to harass it with all kinds of people from Denmark and wherever, creating all kinds of legal problems. But I predict it will be built, and sometime in 2020, we will start seeing the gas flow.
All right. All right, Alexander, we've been going for about an hour and 10 minutes now. Guys, hit that like button, share the channel with everybody you know. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe. And if you are subscribed, check again because they are removing subscribers every now and then. So make sure you are subscribed to the channel.
Indeed.
And of course, go to the Duran shop and buy a t-shirt. Alexander has got 3 or 4 more shirts on the way.
Indeed, he
And
does.
Alexander likes those
Indeed.
shirts a lot. And I'm wearing one of
Very.
them today as well, the white polo
Indeed.
with the double-headed eagle. It is not some sort of Illuminati symbol or anything,
No,
Alexander, at
no,
all.
no, no,
So,
no, 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 no,
yeah,
no, not at all. Not in any way.
not in any way.
Absolutely not in any way. Yeah.
And Alexander, your final thoughts as we wrap it up. And guys, thank you very much to everyone that joined us, and thank you for your super chats and for all your
Yes.
generosity. We really, really appreciate it, and you guys really. You just keep us going, and we really appreciate it. Thank you very much, Alexander. Your final thoughts on what was a very big
A
news
very big,
weekend.
very
Yeah.
big news. As I said, in my opinion, as I said, we should still think of these as two parallel elections, one in Britain, one in Europe. And the fascinating thing is that they are both momentous in each in their different ways. In Britain, we now have a clear situation of the people of England and Wales versus versus London and versus the political elite that is based there. And we'll see how that plays out. I predict that if there is any if there is any sustained attempt by the elite in London to go against the people, then we will start to see real political crisis and instability in Britain for the first time in hundreds of years. In Europe, we are seeing the breakdown of the whole centrist EU project that was created decades ago. It still has some life behind it. We still have people like Macron. I personally think Macron is its last throw. I think when Macron fails, as I predict he will, then I think this whole thing in the EU will finally go into reverse and will unravel, and we will see what takes its place.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one for sure. I think Macron is their last shot. Boy, they're putting all their chips on Macron.
Absolutely.
That doesn't sound too good. Alexander, I have a couple more super chats, and we'll wrap it up. And yes, guys, S. Bennett. I don't know, Scott or Steven. I don't know, but S. Bennett, thank you for your generous super chat. And yeah, hit us up for a mug, or shirt. We'll send it out to you because a lot of people on the super chat are saying send them a mug. We'll get him a mug. Alexander, super chat for Penguins fan. Austria's chancellor stepping down. What effect will that have on Nord Stream?
No, I don't think it will. I think that most people in Austria will support it, and I think Kurz is pretty committed to it, and I think whatever happens, he will remain a political force. The Russians have said if Austrian and German companies pull out, they will complete it themselves. And I think Germany, the political class in Germany is now, and the business class even more, are so committed to it and so much in need of it that I can't see them actually going back on it. I think it would cause massive problems in Germany, where the business community is already very, very antagonistic to the Merkel establishment at the moment. I think it would cause massive problems if this thing was called off.
All right, another super chat from Penguins fan. An update on Turkstream. You did to do another quick update on that. You already talked about it a little bit, but
yeah, now I'm less certain about the progress of Turkstream, but what I've heard is that that's also forging ahead, and I wouldn't have thought there'd be any problems completing Turkstream. The problem is not Turkstream. I understand, by the way, that there is a consensus in Turkey behind Turkstream, even Erdogan's opponents tend to support it. The big question is what will happen once Turkstream is built? Will all these pipelines that will fan out from it across the Balkans and Southern Europe, will they be built? I predict they will be, but I suspect there will be more of a battle over that.
All right, a super chat from Peter Milne. Hi from NZ. Not often do I get to catch you live. Look forward to watching you on the latest news on a daily basis. Keep it up, and it's a privilege to have access to you both. Thank you very much for that super chat. And from John Huber, this will be our final one, and we'll call it a night. How did you guys get together? A super chat. That's a long story.
That's a very long story.
That's a long story. Well, maybe one day we'll do like an Ask Me Anything or something, and we'll get to that.
Why don't we? Let's say that we had a walk in the woods. We met and we talked politics, because we're both, of course, Greeks, in a park in Moscow, actually it was, where we happened to meet. And we had our friends with us, and we went off and we chatted, and we found that we agreed on many things.
Yeah, all right. Yep. That's a good way to sum it up. All right, let's call it a night. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Have a good day, a good Monday, and a good rest of the week. Take care.